Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And currently, as many of you know, I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. But today, I'm actually in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, staying with a friend of mine who's a consistent user, Dan Stevenson, and I'm doing the show from his home. So I'm thrilled to be here visiting family and friends. Today, our guest is Elisa Farri and Gabriele Rosani. I hope I pronounced those names correctly. They're the authors of HBR's Guide to Generative AI for Managers. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm thrilled to have you both. I really like the book, especially it couldn't be more timely than what we're having right now. So it's great to have you both here. So let's just start with you telling us about your professional background, and also telling people who may not be familiar is, what is Capgemini?
Thank you, Mark. Well, I will go first, and then I will hand it over to Gabriele. So I'm Elisa Farri. I have, let's say, always worked at the intersection of academia and business, the real world, but don't tell academia. And I'm very privileged to now work in the management lab of Capgemini Invent and explore how technologies, especially artificial intelligence, are transforming and enhancing management in today's era. Before joining Capgemini, and I will spend a couple of words about what we do in our company, I was partner of a small boutique consulting firm specialized in strategy innovation. And before that, I was a researcher, first in Bocconi University in Milan, and then at Harvard Business School, Europe Research Center in Paris. I mentioned Capgemini a couple of times. Our company is headquartered in Paris, but we do have offices in more than 50 countries globally. And we are a global leader in consulting, technology services, and digital transformation. So what we do, we help businesses globally to harness the power of technology. Within Capgemini, the consulting branch called Invent is the one we belong to as a management lab. So now you understand why I mentioned the fact that, we observe management evolution through the lenses of technology, which is core to our organization, which, by the way, we were recognized as a leader in AI services by Forrester Research. So something that we're truly proud of.
Well, thank you. Gabriele?
Yes, I have a background in management consulting, advising large companies across different sectors, but I always been involved in thought leadership development. So developing content about new frameworks for management. And I also am a frequent contributor to business magazines such as the Harvard Business Review. And actually, many articles I co-author with Elisa, and so we have a long collaboration together on thought leadership and publication. That's also why we wrote this book together. As Elisa said, this book explores how the profession of managers is changing in light of generative AI, and we also want to promote a shift to this new way of working.
So let's get started with the questions about the book. And Elisa, as Gabriele mentioned, you wrote a book for managers. What's unique about managers using generative AI today, and how do they use generative AI, and for what?
Yeah. So managers are very special users of generative AI, which is, I would say, the fascinating element of our research. So in addition to productivity enhancements. They are using generative AI for complex tasks. They do not simply use it, for summarizing long text, for improving a draft of an email, for meeting minutes. They do much more than that. We've been talking to hundreds of managers who share with us that they engage with AI in complex structured thinking. They see AI as an opportunity for augmenting their brain, their way of thinking through problems. They do see untapped potential for making better decisions thanks to the use of AI. We heard so many fascinating stories of managers who, for instance, they do it for self-reflection, okay? So they feel sort of comfortable, in interacting with a neutral interface, also on topics that might relate it, to their leadership style. to how to translate a value into day-to-day behavior, or how to think differently about the way in which they tackle conflict within their team. I have many stories to share, but I would like to pick one because I think it illustrates the uniqueness of how some managers are using Gen AI. Let's take the example of the head of a communication of a large consumer product company, one of the largest globally. And the way in which this person is using generative AI is not just for drafting, a new communications, okay? Let's assume that, she has to draft a new press release. Okay, so she can interact obviously with generative AI in order to support her from a productivity assistance standpoint, in writing, in changing the tone, the style, in checking for typos, and so on and so forth. But then in addition, she goes one step forward. And so she switches to a different way of interacting with the machine. And so instead of simply asking the AI to do tasks for her, she starts talking to the AI. And so in the case of the press release, she asks, if you take the perspective of the target audience I'm, referring to, what would be the reaction? Does the message come through, in a clear way? Am I overlooking anything important? And so you see that the fact that she's using the machine to augment her ability to take multiple perspectives into consideration ultimately leads this person to improve the quality of the output, and she co-creates with AI a much better press release. So I think that this is an illustrative example of how managers can unlock a lot of value beyond pure productivity.
Before I let you go and go on to the next question for Gabriele, how do you make sure that people don't become dependent on it and let it do all the thinking? Because I'm teaching at a university, and one of the things is a big concern for us is that the students are becoming dependent on AI. So if you ask them a question, they're basically using AI to answer everything. And I'm telling them that you can use it for research to get information, but you still need to do the original thinking on your own, or your boss doesn't. No company needs you. So how do you get people not to become so dependent that they can't think for themselves?
This is actually a concern, not only in the business environment, but also in the academic world. We have been hearing, this concern multiple times, also from colleagues of yours, other professors in various universities across geographies. This is a concern that, we systematically find in European universities, in American universities, in Asia, and so on. Our answer is very, very simple. We need to teach and to help build capability of human AI collaboration. because the risk is that if we look at the machine as only a way to delegate, then we might incur into the risk that we are also ending up delegating our judgment. And so that's why the keyword for me and Gabriele is human plus AI equal collaboration. It should not be either a delegation or, let's say, a competition. And then the other important element that we need to nurture every single day is judgment. Judgment should be nurtured at individual level, but even more importantly, at team level. And now let's go back to the academic environment that you just mentioned. A lot of former colleagues, friends, also professors that we work with, they are worried that students are falling into this solo trap, themselves and the machine. And they are seeing few and few students, gathering before a class or discussing, debating, case studies before the plenary and so on and so forth. And so I think that we need to, let's say, make sure that students keep not only leveraging their judgment, but also leverage the power of the team in order to use the AI. And so one strategy that we typically recommend to professors, for instance, is to invite the students to do a group work with the AI, because we know that they will use it, in any case. So why not injecting the AI into the teamwork? And so, for instance, we've been accompanying various professors, and how they can start, interacting with AI, and also to rethink some group assignments. But yeah, these elements of creating the right setting, the many to one, so many humans interacting with AI, could be one of the strategies to make sure that there's also some human to human debate, and not just you trapped in this solo one-on-one.
So we have a question already from the audience. There are so many AI platforms. Which ones are recommended for managers for performance assessment and mapping growth?
Wow, this is a fascinating question, and thank you for asking. The question is fascinating in the way it's phrased. Let me elaborate on this. The common narrative is built around searching for the right technology doing the right task, sort of a magic wand. Everybody, is craving for the magic wand, the magic app doing, the perfect thing. What we're seeing in our research is that managers, the black belts, who are really GenAI enabled, first of all, they shift the mindset. They are not looking for the technology that is specialized. They want to be in control. They want to be the ones who compare also different platforms. So just to go back to your point of the question, if I were in the head of one of the pioneers that we know, his answer would be, well, first of all, go to the general model. Okay, because typically the most popular ones are also the ones that are performing better now compared to some specialized ones. The speed of improvement is significantly higher when you go to the general, and then start comparing. So if you are in charge of doing performance assessment and mapping, you are the domain expert. You should challenge the machine. Do not, again, delegate or outsource to the machine. Be in control. Tell the machine what you expect the machine to do, what framework, approach you would like the machine to apply. Test the ability of the machine to understand what kind of approach, and then let's start interacting. This is my first recommendation.
So let's go to Gabriele and the next question. So what's the adoption rate of generative AI among managers? Any differences across sectors, geographies, industries?
Well, our Capgemini Research Institute conducted recently a large survey on almost 1,500 managers across 15 countries, different sectors and different functions. And they ask, how often do you use generative AI in your job? Once a week, once a day, multiple times a day, etc. And so the result of this are that only 15% of managers use Gen AI at least once a day on a daily basis. And of course, if you look at the weekly usage, so the people we use it at least once a week, this percentage is much, much higher. It's almost 70%. And so some people may say, okay, this is good because it's 70% weekly usage. But when if you want to change the way you work, you should look at the daily usage, because it's like saying that I use my laptop once a week. So it wouldn't be a real change in the way I work. So we need to look at the daily adoption. If we look at the daily adoption, is only 15%, which is very limited. And of course, there are differences between countries or geographies and function and sectors, but it doesn't change the main message. So the main message is that there is a big gap between what managers say and what managers do in terms of Gen AI use. So they talk a lot about Gen AI, but when you ask specifically if they use it every day, multiple times a day, the answer is not really. And so that's also why we wrote the book. So try to help managers integrate Gen AI in their daily usage. We hope to see these percentages going up very, very quickly. Also because if managers need to be credible with their teams, leading a transformation of large scale, they need to lead by examples. They need to get their hands dirty. They need to start using it systematically, to try to think how to change the way they work, the way they can do things differently, better, faster, smarter. Okay, and looking at this 15% of managers who are already very heavy users of Gen AI is sort of looking at the future. So we see some pockets of future already there. It's not widespread, but there is a potential to make this change more embedded in the way managers work.
I think it's changing consulting in a major way, maybe not so much in the kind of work that you do, but for McKinsey and Bain and some of the others, some of them are starting to let go of a lot of people because the companies are saying, hey, I can use AI to do the market research. I really only need the expert partners to interpret what I'm getting here and give me advice. How is AI changing the consulting world?
It's a little bit premature, I think, to give a definitive answer. I think that we always need to look at the fact, as Elisa mentioned, that it's not human versus AI or AI replacing humans, but it's more the opportunity for humans to leverage AI in what they do, to become better, smarter, and also to use it more as a thought partner and not only a productivity tool. And by doing this, you will basically augment your capacity, your ability. And so I think we need to look at the potential of, in terms of opportunities, not in terms of replacement. So here is always human plus AI and what together they can do, rather than thinking about, okay, these things can be replaced by AI, which is probably a little bit simplistic.
Yeah, I agree with you. So the concept of co-thinking is intriguing and fascinating, as both of you have talked about. Could you please share some example stories of managers? And so, Gabriele, maybe share examples from managing yourself and managing the business. And Elisa can follow up with sharing examples from managing teams and managing change. So, Gabriele, why don't you start first? Gabriele.
Yeah, for example, in our book, we have 4 main sections. One is how to use Gen AI to manage yourself, then to manage your team, to manage the business, and then to manage change. So if we start with the first bucket, which is managing yourself, think, for example, about persuasive communication. So managing yourself is you need to be, let's say, effective when you communicate. This is the key element for any manager, okay? So how can you use Gen AI to be a smarter and better communicator? Most managers, when they have to, do a presentation in front of an audience, they can use Gen AI as a sparring partner, especially to prepare the Q&A session. You go there, you have to pitch, and then there are 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A sessions, and the people in the audience may put you on the grill. So how can Gen AI help you get prepared for this Q&A session? So you can really have a sort of a dialogue with Gen AI saying, okay, I have to deliver this speech to this audience. I give you a little bit of context, who I am, what kind of messages of my speech, who is the audience, what's the goal of the speech. And then I ask, okay, given this context, give me 10 questions that the audience may ask, and in particularly tough questions, not the easy ones. So think about the message, think about the audience, and give me 10 tough questions. So the machine gives me a list of questions, then I can go through and say, okay, maybe the first 4 or 5 are fine for me, I know how to handle, but then there are 2 or 3 that are really tough, and maybe I should think a little bit how to handle. And then you can, move in this dialogue with the machine, saying, okay, number 7, number 8, I wouldn't be sure how to manage those questions. Could you please help me prepare a convincing, compelling answer? And so the machine will give you an option for this answer. Then it's up to you to say, okay, I like this, but I will also consider that. So you bring in your additional thoughts, and through this back and forth with the machine, you thought together with the machine, and then try to create value together, so that at the end you can get prepared, because you have a sparring partner, and the dialogue is not just clicking a button and waiting for an answer, but as you see here in this example, you go back and forth and try to really to think together what kind of answer to handle these objections, and maybe what I'm missing, what I am overlooking that I should consider because that might be tricky, etc. No? And then you can also do a sort of a rehearsal. So you can say, okay, let's start. Let's simulate a potential Q&A session. The machine will start asking you a question, and then you will answer. And then at the end, the machine may also give you some tips. Okay, here you did well, here you did not that well. Maybe you could, take a different tone, take a different message, etc. So today, with the voice-to-voice feature, it's also possible to have a real conversation with 0 latency, and you can rehearsal, and so that you can get prepared to your presentation. As you see, this example is not about efficiency. It's about, thinking together, try to be prepared. So it's a different level of value that you create together with the machine.
Yeah, I think that was a good comprehensive answer, and I use it that way myself all the time. I don't become dependent on it when I'm speaking. I write out my first my speech, and then I give it to chat or mindpal.com. I mean, mindpal.io, and then I ask it, what am I missing, or what suggestions do you have? And I find that if you rely on it to create it, it gives you very superficial. It doesn't dig deep enough. But if you provide the information yourself, it can help you get to the next level. Elisa, what are some of the most common traps? We didn't get your answer on sharing examples from managing teams and managing change.
Yeah. So Gabriele just shared with you, an example of how you can use it, for, personal tasks, okay? But in the daily life of a manager, you find yourself managing other people, one team, multiple teams, and depending on the hierarchy, you could also manage the entire organization. And we all know that, when it comes to leading teams, there might be some complex tasks. You need to assign a new purpose to a newly established team. You need to manage conflict. You need to negotiate sometimes with team members. But then, every time you set up a team, typically you do it because you would like this team to implement a complex project or to solve a problem. And so there's this interesting story of a project manager in a large automotive company who has been using generative AI in the co-analysis of technical problems related to the powertrain of the car. And the very first time he shared with me this story, I was fascinated by the ability of this manager to interact with the AI in a way that it was very, very clear the boundaries, So the AI, the machine, was acting as the methodological guide, so walking him through a structured thinking process, because as you can imagine, when a technical problem emerges related to the powertrain, the root causes could be n+1, okay? And so the machine was the methodological guide, the sparring partner, engaging in a conversation with this project manager. And he was the one providing context, providing his deep expertise, being able to differentiate, between what worked in the past, what did not. And it's true that this person has gained also in terms of speed, because he was very fair when he shared it with me. He said, yeah, I'm going, I went from few days to few minutes in the identification of the main potential root cause. Then it's still up to me to find the right solution. I'm not delegating problem solution to the machine, but I'm feeling much more augmenting and enhanced. And so this is an example of how, when you have a complex topic, like a complex problem to solve, if you interact in a co-thinking way with the machine can truly augment, in some cases also accelerate a traditional process. But let's look also beyond, let's say, pure business or technical problems. Let's look at, a cultural change. You want to drive a transformation inside the organization. And it could be, also an AI-driven transformation. You want to take people on board. You want to help them embrace a new mindset. And so in this case, we talked to the head of a transformation team inside the finance unit. And this manager shared with us that the way in which he used AI is as a facilitator for self-reflection. I will try to be clear on this. So he designed a dialogue that he shared with all the team members and asked them to execute this ready-to-use dialogue with AI to help them reflect how to shift from the old to the new mindset. And so the role of the AI was not to tell them what to do, but was to help them reflect, based on who they are, on, probably preferences or character traits, to identify what could be the tricky, obstacles to overcome in order to embrace. And then he said, let's reconvene in a couple of weeks and let's have a discussion, within the team. So all human only, no AI in the room. And let's have a fruitful conversation. And he said that this was so valuable because people came, having done their homework with AI, and it was a very powerful conversation. Then they rolled out, this dialogue, and they asked the entire unit to do the same exercise to make them aware of what is expected from each of them in terms of mindset shift. So what the book does, it unpacks all of these stories that we collected, over the last 1 year by talking to hundreds of managers, and we translated all these stories in prompt sequences. So that's why it's a practical guide. So for instance, for root cause analysis, for mindset shift, in the book, the readers will find a prompt that they can copy and paste and run on whatever model they have, because the book is totally tech agnostic. What we are saying is not that we have the best sequences ever. That's not the point of the book. The book wants to be a springboard and to provide, especially to people who are not heavy users, a first experience of dialogue. And then I'm pretty sure that, based on their domain of expertise, they will be able, to take it and adapt it to their own needs.
I have a question from the audience for Gabriele. It sounds that every AI platform needs to be trained to give you the best results. However, all managers are time-starved. Sir, how should they invest in training AI?
I can tell you a concrete real-world example. There is a CEO of a tech company, tech company Coursera, the online learning platform. So the CEO is very vocal on the way he himself uses Gen AI. And it's interesting because he said, I don't focus on the prompt, I focus on the context, because context is what really counts. So he has, rather than having a library of prompts, he has a sort of Word file with the context that matters about the company, about the specific strategy that they is pursuing. So, and this context gets, longer and longer and denser and denser. And this is the real treasure. Because then if you inject that content into the AI system, then of course the performance is completely different, because context is what really counts in terms of boost of performance, because otherwise Gen AI will give you a generic answer that can be fit to any kind of company or strategy. But if you have your context, which is well curated, you add pieces that matters, and then you put it into the system, then the system will be very fit and very in line with your way of thinking and what's important for your company. And then you can move into the dialogue because the system will have this context. So rather than having long libraries of prompts, he has a long list of context documents that are updated, so that when he has a strategic conversation with the machine, a debate, or that there is a certain trend, we need to understand the implication on our strategy, etc. If you upload the context, of course, within a secure environment, the conversation can be much, much more into the real needs of his company.
So, and maybe it's Elisa might answer this. How long does it take to train up an agent to be at least somewhat helpful? So how do you train up your AI agent? How long does that typically take until they add real value?
Well, I'm not an expert in agents in the sense that from a technical standpoint, I'm not equipped, to answer from a technical perspective. What we refer to in the book is not to the use of agents, but to the use of chatbots. So how you can leverage chatbots like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, Chat, or Google Gemini, Claude by Anthropic, and so on and so forth. And so in this case, it's not about training. Once again, it boils down to the right instructions and context that Gabriele was referring to. So yeah, it's and then what makes me smile is that it's based on our experience, it takes more to train humans than to teach, a chatbot what to expect, the chatbot to do for you, to be really honest.
It's the humans who need more of the training.
Yeah.
Understood. So, Elisa, let's go on with this. What are the common traps to avoid? Because people are so new to this. and they want to get the most out of it. What kind of things can they make mistakes on, but how do they avoid them?
Mm-hmm. So there are some common traps that are pretty well known, and they boil down to the fact that this technology is not deterministic. This is not a calculator where 2 + 2 is equal to 4, and you blindly trust the calculator. And you do not activate, your judgment or critical thinking because, you believe that what the calculator is returning is the correct number. This is a probabilistic based model technology. And so there are traps like trust, like the risk of fabrication, of hallucinations. We, talk to managers who were not aware that, AI can fabricate, can fabricate a Wall Street Journal article, for instance. It can fabricate sources. And so that's why it's so important for managers to be familiar and knowledgeable about this technology, because there are traps and risks around the corner. But then in addition to the common ones, the ones that I just mentioned, there are also some very peculiar traps that we uncovered along our research project. One I already mentioned, it's the solo trap. So the fact that the machine is obviously designed for one-on-one interaction as of now. And so we already discussed about this at the beginning. The other one is the speed trap, which might sound weird, but it might have happened, at least to any of you in the audience. This feeling that the machine goes so fast that you tend to rush as well, okay? Some managers even told us, that they feel stupid sometimes. I think that they're an exception, but the fact that the machine goes so fast is a magnet. And so that's why it's so important to be aware of, let's say, the power, but also the potential risks of the machine, also to, define some rules of responsible use for us as humans. So for instance, we discussed about strategies to overcome the solo trap. So let's change the setting. So let's make sure that AI is embedded in a team discussion or teamwork. When it comes to the speed trap, let's remind that, that it might be useful to pause and reflect, to ponder and reflect, to detach a bit, and then, open the conversation. In some of our prompts, we remember to add a guideline where we ask the machine to remind us to pause and reflect, or to seek, for a different perspective from experts and colleagues, because this is a way, to activate, in your brain that probably, this is taking longer. Personal story, in the early days of ChatGPT, I remember telling Gabriele, well, yesterday, I was on ChatGPT for 7 hours. I said, this is not good, okay? It was a blast, but this is not good, okay? So I experienced it myself, the fact that, it can truly be a magnet. And so it's important for managers to be aware. And so it's not just about building up a capability because you want to show off, because you want to say that you are the GenAI-enabled manager. That's not the point. You want to be equipped with the right knowledge in order to be a responsible leader inside the organization, and also make your team aware of some of these traps and be ready. More traps might pop up in the future as technology keeps evolving.
We have a question, and maybe this is for Gabriele. We are learning more, we are leaning more heavily on expert trained discussion gates. Won't we get diminished return as we continue to train the model? I guess either one of you could answer that question.
I'm not sure I understood correctly, but if I can rephrase, so you mean that when you train the, so maybe you can rephrase the question, Mark?
Yeah. So what I mean is
when
you train the when you initially train the model, if you're more heavily like relying on expert like those choke points, those basically expert trained decision gates. Logically, I would think that we would get diminishing returns as we continue to train up the model. And we can get some really wonky stuff because a lot of the data bottlenecks through those points. I'm just asking, well, if that's been your experience or like how you work around it, if you have some sage advice for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way could be to leverage some perspective taking, so to avoid the trap of being, let's say, within a certain frame and not considering other perspectives, to try to inject other perspective. And a trick to do it is when you have a conversation with Gen AI, and you could say, okay, this is what the discussion is going, your recommendation, they go into one direction, but what if we take a different perspective? What if we consider maybe a lateral thinking? Could you please help me reframe the problem, see the problem from different directions? Could you challenge this? So you have to inject this element of perspectives and challenge as a way to diminish the risk to go in the conformity trap, which is, to go into the path, the beaten path. Try to open. So it's also up to the human. It's not just the machine. It's also up to the human to interrogate the machine and having a dialogue and triggering the different way, different perspective, something which is not in the main flow of the discussion. And this is up to the human. That's why we insist in this combination, human and machine. We should not think only what the machine can do and how we can train the machine and blah, blah, but also how the interaction with the human can create or co-create, in this case, value in the discussion of a problem.
Yeah, and if I may, just to build on what Gabriele just said, remember that you can put AI on the grill. You can challenge AI. Okay, so if you're feeling that it's not the appropriate answer, if it's not a novel, it's not specific, challenge the machine. Again, this once again boils down to embracing a conversational mindset. If we do not shift from looking at AI as just a technology that you press a button and magic happens, but you start seeing it as a way, to interact as if you would do with a coach, with a tutor, with a guide, with an expert, and so on and so forth, then through this conversational approach, you can truly unlock value. Otherwise, it's all about clicking and waiting. And then I agree with you, Alexander. It's pure passive and zero contribution from the human. Wouldn't you want to be in the lead? Wouldn't you want to be the strategy architect of the type of collaboration that you would like to have with AI? All the managers who are heavy users, they want to be in control. They want to drive, the type of conversation. They do not outsource this to the AI. And so this is also the message of the book. So if you want to be in control, you need to know how to use the technology. You need to interact in the appropriate way. And it's all about active use and not just passive fruition of the AI.
Here's another question from the audience, and you have to decide between the two of you who is best to answer this. For some professions like lawyers who rely heavily on outcome of past cases, could managers use AI more than other professions, for example, to predict the outcome of a legal case and then decide on how to allocate resources for each case? Or I'm also thinking strategy.
Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing is that AI is used in the legal function. There are cases of head of legal departments. For instance, in Moderna, it was featured also in the media last year. This big experiment that Moderna run with OpenAI. And the legal function was one of the corporate functions which took part in this massive experiment of how to apply Gen AI in their daily work. So according to this experiment, but there are also other researches, yes, generative AI can definitely support the legal professions. But when it comes to prediction, when it comes to thinking, about potential scenarios, this is a use case that we find also in other functions and areas of organizations. For instance, you, Mark, mentioned strategy. Okay, so there are some business heads or let's say sales managers that ask, the AI about, simulating scenarios. So it's not about using it once again as the magic, the magic ball, the crystal ball, and the wizard, and so on. But it's more about augmentation of thinking. So maybe I'm expecting, that the future relationship with a client, or let's say the legal case might unfold in ABC as potential paths. They ask the machine what I'm not seeing. And so once again, it's the breadth that the machine can provide you. And probably, let's be honest, 4 out of 5 were already on your radar screen. But the fifth one could be, the differentiator. And so the value lies in the fact that, once again, it helps you see things that you're not seeing, looking at things that you believe you know, but you don't know, and so on and so forth. So again, it's about augmentation. It's not about replacing you.
I wondered, you mentioned before about fabrication, and you think that when you get this information, like let's say you say to them, give me this information and give me the third-party source that you got this information from. How do you know that the third-party source, even if you're expert in an area, things change all the time? Research shows that things we thought even a couple years ago was wrong, and things have changed. So how do you double check to make sure it hasn't given you erroneous information?
Well, this happened also in the early days of Google, to be honest.
Yeah.
We are not new to the fabrication risk and fabrication traps, okay? So you may remember also the early days of Wikipedia. We had very similar concerns, and so we all learned how to navigate. And so, we need to train our muscle, first of all. But then on the other hand, we need also to remember that we can ask AI, to provide the link to the source. In the early days, this was not possible. But now, most models, when you ask, give me the source, either it automatically gives you the source, and then you can click and check if it's the official Wall Street Journal or not, or it's a way to uncover that it was totally fabricated. What our technical experts are telling us is that we should expect less and less risk of hallucinations in the future. So as models improve, we might expect a reduction in this risk.
In what ways can managers cultivate a mindset? This is for Gabriele. Mindset that not only embraces the conversational nature of generative AI, which you guys have been talking about a lot today, but also remains vigilant against potential biases and errors in AI-generated content.
Yeah, I think that, it's important to have a conversational mindset, as we said, but it's also important to have a sort of a probabilistic mindset. So as Elisa said, this time, maybe for the first time, we use a technology which is not deterministic. So we are used to calculators that are always 100% correct and right. So we expect that from a technology. And in this case, it's a different technology. It's based on statistics. So first of all, we need to be aware that this is based on statistics. So we need to start from that mindset. It's a probabilistic model, can go wrong. Sometimes it hallucinates. So first of all, be aware. Then you need a capability. So some skills how to avoid falling into these traps. For example, Elisa just mentioned, you can simply ask to provide the link to the website so that the quote is real. So I think it's a matter of how to use the model, what kind of checks you can do as an individual. Of course, there is also a matter of judgment. So the critical thinking. We talk a lot about training the people on prompting, etc. But what is important is also to double down on critical thinking. And so the manager should sit together within his team and explaining that there might be some traps in using GenAI, showing some example, how to, so some tips like this one we just discussed, some tips how to avoid falling into a trap, how you can mitigate the risk so that your team is aware and they know how to maneuver. So it's a matter of judgment, critical thinking. Also, it's not just the individual judgment, but also the team judgment. Because sometimes, as Elisa said, we are trapped in the one-on-one conversation with AI, and we don't go to our colleague next to us and ask for validation. Maybe our colleague has a deeper expertise in a specific domain. Why shouldn't we ask our colleague? So sometimes also stopping the interaction with the machine and involving other people. But myself, sometimes when I go into some brainstorming with the machine about the new framework, then I stop and I go to Elisa and I ask, okay, what do you think? Because I think that this is good, but there are other elements I'm less convinced. What's your perspective? So I try to take the human perspective of my colleagues into the discussion. And then this sort of is envisioning a future when you work together with your colleagues, human ones, and also together with Gen AI, and then you create these dynamics, and this is fascinating.
Elisa, as generative AI becomes more adept in human-like interactions, how do you foresee the evolution of managerial roles and the skills required to effectively utilize these AI collaborators in various sectors?
So we expect more and more organizations to embrace generative AI. There are researches that predicts an evolution towards a human and AI way of working. So when we look at the managerial roles, we expect as one of the most critical skills to develop this ability of managing teams that might be mixed in the future. So not just the humans, but also humans that are using AI. And so we just to assure our audience, we will still need managers in the future. The job is going to be let's say reshaped. The good news is that generative AI can free up some time of managers, especially we are seeing this in the middle management manager layer, the ones where typically some administrative, bureaucratic, repetitive tasks can take a lot of time and put a lot of burden. And so the fact that they are enabled by GenAI, they can free up time and dedicate it to higher value tasks. And then, in addition to these skills of being able, to navigate a workforce with, not just human, but also AI, once again, it requires a lot of critical thinking, a lot of judgment, also the ability to see, what could be potential traps. So the anticipation of risks will be an important skills for managers, because they have the knowledge, the contextual knowledge of the organization. They know the nuances of the organization, how the organization works, and so on and so forth. So think about new hires. New hires will come probably already equipped with this capability of using AI. So that's why it's so important that managers can guide them in a responsible use. And so judgment is imperative, and also the fact that they need to be a bit flexible and agile also in adapting their way of leading and managing in a context where AI could be part of the game.
So we have another question. We have a couple more questions from the audience before we close it out today. How do you both feel about AI designing advanced chips that would work but are so complex that we really don't know how?
Wow, this is a technical question, very technical. And unfortunately, I do not feel like I'm the tech expert to talk about chips.
Understood.
So sorry, Alexander.
Okay. So let's go to the next question. What can we tell our managers about what the future practical AI landscape will look like in the next 5 years?
Okay, I think so. To answer the question, we should look at the 15% that I mentioned at the beginning, because the future is already here. If we study how the heavy users of generative AI today are interacting with the technology, we can see the future. So these heavy users are very advanced. The point is that they are just small pockets in organizations. So we have pockets of future in our companies. Sometimes they are also not very vocal, so they are sort of not visible. The point, we should make them visible and try to have a contagion effect also on the other parts of the company. But basically, we are talking about people who uses Gen AI multiple times a day for multiple tasks. It comes as a second nature for them. So they have this switch in the mindset. They are Gen AI first, and they basically use it like we use Google. So for them, it's normal. It comes naturally. Unfortunately, they are sort of a minority, but we probably, in a matter of a couple of years or 2-3 years, we will see this happening more widespread and at scale in organizations. But there's no need to speculate or to be futurologist. I think if you talk with the people that are already heavy user today, you will see the future at scale.
Yeah, I think this may be almost the last question, but I have one more question of this myself. How much of our discussion making as managers can we safely devolve to an AI system?
Well, personally, I feel that we should not delegate our decisions to the AI. This is also the core message of the book. So the human manager should be in the driving seat when it comes to making decisions. It's about making better decisions with the support of AI and not vice versa.
Silicon Valley has been turned upside down by, at least initially here, by the prospects of DeepSeek. And I just started using it myself. I use like 4 or 5 of these things. What's your take on their concerns about DeepSeek? And do you use multiple AI? I guess you have to write the book, but do you use multiple AI tools like DeepSeek and ChatGPT and the others every day?
Well, we use the tools we're allowed to. So absolutely, yes, we do use multiple tools. And also we tried multiple tools when we were writing the book because we wanted to make sure that our prompts could work on various models. So we tested the most popular ones last year when we were writing the book. And so that's why we decided let's write a book that is tech agnostic, because these prompts can pretty work almost everywhere.
So the audience wants to know, what's your take on DeepSeek? Is it really everything it's cracked up to be, DeepSeek?
Well, in Italy, we do not have access to DeepSeek.
Oh,
So
okay.
So it's tricky to have an opinion because the government decided that this is something that we do not have access to. It happened the same thing with ChatGPT in the early days. because they asked for some clarifications on the GDPR regulation for privacy. And so we don't have access. So I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, so I mean, that's going to be a big question, I guess, for lots of countries about which of these tools they allow the masses to use and which ones they have some concerns about, or how they're programmed, or how that will affect their own countries in terms of collecting information. I want to thank you both for taking the time. The book was awesome. And clearly by all the questions that we had today and people saying that they want to share this interview with others, you did a fabulous job. And so congratulations on the book, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having us.
And I want to thank the audience for their very good questions today. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Everyone, have a wonderful weekend.